This meeting is being recorded.
Today is July 19, 2023. This is the meeting of the Container Storage Interface Community. Today on the agenda, we're going to go through the PR 544 about modify volume. There's a couple of big open questions that we're going to walk through, and we can discuss any other open questions or any other topics if needed. Feel free to add to the agenda. So with that, I think there was a conversation between Sunny and Ben on the second question here. Sunny, do you want to repeat your question?
Yeah, my question is there any existing APIs doing the same behavior? Because
I mean, like a similar example would be resize volume, right? If Kubernetes will allow you to attempt to resize the volume, and if the SP doesn't support it, I believe it just goes into an endless loop of saying, you know, I'm not resizing the volume, right?
Mm.
I mean, does anyone actually? I've never actually tried that, to be honest. So I assume that basically the PVC size gets modified, but then just nothing happens after that if the SP doesn't allow it. Is that accurate?
That was why there was a change that Hemant made to allow you to change the volume size back to basically stop the unsupported retries.
Okay.
There is also this failed precondition. Let's say if you don't support resize, right? I think this is for the offline resize cases.
Oh yeah.
And then we have something like so it actually stops. He made that change to stop retry for that particular error code.
Yeah, there was a question on this spec about should we allow SPs to return failure?
Oh, failed precondition?
Yeah, a failed precondition. If
the
parameters are valid, except that some hidden variable prevents it from making the mutation that you're asking for, should we allow it to fail and then spin endlessly?
Yeah, that probably makes sense, right? Otherwise, it just will never be successful. And
well, but we could take the stance that SPs should not use features that can't be reasonably expected to succeed all the time, right? It's not
like it's not all the. I think there is a capability, right? There is a capability check whether you supports it or not.
Right. So there's a capability for modify volume. But we could take the stance that says if you support this capability, and the CO sends down a bunch of parameters that are valid, and then you should update them. Like you shouldn't fail for an unknown reason, right? Because there's nothing Kubernetes can do about that.
But there are maybe certain conditions that we could allow them to say failed precondition is just never possible, or I'm not sure what will be. So somehow it just never going to be successful, even though the parameters are, let's say they have all the parameters that they provided.
The upshot of that is that we can't do anything at the CO level, right? We just have to say, okay, that's your problem, right?
We just stop, but we just stop retrying, which is also good, I think.
Okay. Well, that would be the key difference. If we're allowed to stop retrying as a result of that, then it matters.
Right. I remember there was one thing that actually Hemant fixed it in the resizer to do that once it sees this error code for the resize feature. So
the idea is someone changes a volume access class to a new volume access class that has some bogus parameter in it, or some parameter that cannot be changed because of some aspect of the volume. We will try one time to reconcile it. And when the SP comes back with failed precondition, we'll say we're done reconciling and we failed. And then we'll just wait until another change to the volume attribute class before trying to reconcile again.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's what we did for the resize feature. We have something like this.
Okay. So then we need a way of. Well, I guess we just need a way for the reconciler to know that it should stop and not and
Yeah,
say, I'm done
it checks the
reconciling.
return. It checks the return code. Like in the resizer right now, it checks the return code. If it's the field precondition, it just.
But how does the end user know the difference between a successful and a failed attempt then? Like, do we record an event somewhere that says attempt to change volume access class failed for reason XYZ and we're not retrying and we're done?
There should be a event. I would assume that I have to double check. I think
Okay.
that, yeah, otherwise I agree, it's not that obvious, right? But I think.
Yeah, I worry someone would change a VAC.
Mhm.
We would say it's reconciled, but it wouldn't be reconciled. And then no one would ever know that now you had a volume with a VAC that didn't match reality.
Mhm.
Like by current design, it will throw invalid argument.
Invalid argument.
Yeah.
We're right, but the Kubernetes behavior would be to keep retrying, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So like that's the normal thing to do is just, if you get an error, you just back off and try again later and hope for a different result.
Yeah,
And
so we probably
you
need to
emit
describe
events
this.
so that a human eventually reacts and does something differently.
Yeah, I guess we just need to write this one clearly, like in what case we call.
Did we have a status field on this volume attribute class?
It's not the VAC, it would be the individual PVC or the PV even. I don't remember where the VAC is set. Is it on the?
Yeah, PVC has a status about this. Yeah.
Where is the VAC set?
It's going to be set in there is a field in the PVC that
In
records the
PVC spec?
status.
Okay, right. So then, well, the question is, will we update the PVC status VAC to match the PVC spec VAC and say we're done reconciling? Because that's how you would signal you're done reconciling, is by updating the status, but flag somewhere that like it didn't actually work.
Do we have a message field, Sunny? I need to check. I need to check that.
I think it.
We should, right? We should have a message field.
I don't
Or
think
it's
we should
just
have a message field. I think what should happen is it should emit events when it can't reconcile, and it should keep retrying, because it's too weird to have it like just stop retrying, and and updating the status to, because you'd have to update the status to match the spec in order for it to stop retrying, I think. And updating the status implies that you were successful. So I feel like we just have to retry until someone checks out the event and notices that something was wrong, and then they update the volume access or the volume attribute class and they try a different one. And I personally think that our guidance here in the CSI spec is that you should really try to succeed. We shouldn't implement features in modify volume that can fail for reasons that the higher levels know nothing about, right? The kinds of features we should put in here are the kinds of things that you should be able to set anytime, any place, anywhere, and that they should just be updatable, and that they shouldn't be contingent on other hidden things that might or might not be in the right state to allow the change to succeed. So I really don't like the idea of failed precondition here. But that's my personal opinion. I could be convinced otherwise.
I was thinking from the UX perspective, if the set of parameters is invalid and we just reject the request, the end user actually needs the admin to recreate a set of VAC, valid VAC, and then they can update.
Yeah, but you have the same problem with storage classes, right? If you have garbage in your storage class and someone tries to create a volume with storage class, it's just going to fail. And an admin just has to fix that. So like this just has to be the responsibility of whoever's creating the VACs to not put garbage in them.
Okay, so we are not going to like trying to trim off the invalid parameters and update the volume.
I don't think so. I think I think it's reasonable to expect that the person creating the VACs has like read the appropriate documentation and not misspelled anything and tested, that the parameters are going to work. And if there is any error, like we should just do the normal Kubernetes thing and report the error and retry later.
Okay.
Because you always have the option of noticing the error and then picking a new VAC and trying that one and presumably succeeding if a mistake is made. So you never get stuck. It's just we could have a lot of spinning retries in the case that someone does something wrong with the VAC. But that's not a new situation.
I guess a question I have is, since this is kind of a generic modified volume call, is the intention that eventually something like resize volume would be part of this call?
I think actually right now there's nothing stopping from the CO to change the size from the modified volume API.
Yeah, I think the only contract we have is that like the volume is supposed to be between the minimum size and the maximum size specified at create or expand. And Kubernetes never specifies a maximum size. It only ever specifies the minimum. So you could implement a resize through this, but you wouldn't get all the machinery that you get with like the node resize. When you do an expand, we have extra machinery that makes sure that the node plugin also gets notified that an expand is going on, so that you can do node side things. Here, there's no such facility. So if you implement an expand through the modified volume call, you'd never get a chance to do anything on the node. All right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, is that topic beat to death? Can we go on to one of the other questions?
Do we have a conclusion?
I think the conclusion is that we do the normal Kubernetes thing and we don't allow or if you return failed precondition for whatever reason, we treat it the same as invalid argument. We just generate an event and go back to reconciling. So there's no way to stop the reconciling early if you can't successfully update the VAC.
If we don't handle that, especially, then we don't really need to document that error code, right? I think we document.
Exactly. I think they can return the error code if they want, but it'll be handled the same as invalid argument.
Sorry, I joined a little bit late. We were talking about the capability if it is defined.
We were talking about error returns from modified volume and how the reconciler should respond to them, and we were concluding that it should handle all errors the same, which is just generate an event and retry later. We would never stop trying to reconcile unless we got success.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess we were looking at volume resize, volume expand as an example. And I think on the expand side, you folks implemented logic that says if you provide some invalid size after one attempt, CSI is going to return an error code that tells Kubernetes to stop retrying until the value is changed. Is that right?
Yeah, so in case of, I think certain class of errors, like failed precondition, it will just, it will stop trying.
How does it know that, Hemant? Like, where does it store the information that says I should stop retrying?
It's trying to.
Hemant, that's in the resizer, right? You made that change. And then that's actually related to the offline volume expansion feature. I think it's a.
But
Yeah.
where is the state persisted so that it remembers?
I'm just, I have to take a look at the code.
I thought you made that change in the resizer itself to stop retrying.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're saying if the resizer if the sidecar itself were to be bounced, it would retry again. and it would retry one time and then stop.
Yeah.
Well, we could do something like that. Yeah, we could say it's a stateless stop retrying if you get a failed precondition.
Yeah, so if it returns a failed precondition error, then like, because currently we are in resizer, we are treating that error as like, okay, it might be in use and like the volume needs to be offline, so it cannot be expanded while it is online. So we add it to we store that in the external resizer that this volume has thrown that error. And so until like until the status changes, like no pod is using it or something, then it's
well,
like it won't
So,
try.
so the issue here with modify volume is there's no trigger to get it to start reconciling again once you return that error, other than changing it to a different volume attribute class. That would be
Yeah,
the only way to get it to start retrying again. And that's not so great. Because if it really is just a failed precondition and the user can observe that, they could go solve whatever problem it is behind the scenes. And it could succeed if it was retrying. If we stop retrying, then they have no way to get it to start again.
yeah. In this case, I think it makes sense to keep retrying.
Okay.
We might have to like increase the exponential back off, like should be more aggressive maybe,
Hmm.
because the 2-minute highest is too low in this case. It will retry too frequently.
So you're saying make the max like 10 minutes or 15 minutes or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that's just an implementation choice that doesn't affect the spec.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we have a conclusion on that one, I think we should spend some time discussing absent parameters. So my thinking here was mostly I want to ensure that that COs get the guidance that they should always send every mutable parameter that they know about, and that we don't want to have a situation where like COs attempt to mutate parameters one at a time.
Yeah.
That was my real worry with
For
this, with the language I tried to add, was I didn't want, you know, if you have a current VAC with a bunch of parameters and a new one for the CO, to try to mutate them one by one. I wanted to say, no, just send everything and we'll update it to the new values. And whether an absent value means like reset it or don't make any change, we don't really need to say anything, because that could be an SP choice, right? We just want the CO to know that it should always send everything that it knows.
And sorry, yeah, no, I agree that CO should not try to modify volume piecemeal. That'll be not nice. I think we're talking about the next thing now. So what happens on empty mutable parameter listing? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So we don't want CO to specify one parameter at a time. I agree that, okay, CO should send everything that it knows about.
Okay, so if we can agree on that, then the question is, do we care about what the SP does with empty parameters, or can we leave that up to the SP? And then,
Yeah, I mean,
and then, how do we word the guidance in the spec?
so leaving it to SP is problematic, because like we want knowledge. Like if I have dealt with one SP, like one SP I specify IOPS, then another SP I want to switch from like vSphere to, let's say, NetApp, then maybe the parameter itself is called different, but I want, okay, like that knowledge should be portable. So if one SP says if you leave IOPS, then I will just update whatever else you have specified. Another SP says, okay, if you leave IOPS, then I will reset back to the very initial value, which could be way, way low. So it creates this situation which is like, it's not very consistent. And as
Well, but the storage vendor would have to document how their implementation works, and the platform administrator would have to read that documentation and then act appropriately. So if a vendor did have the behavior where omitting IOPS means you get some very low default value, then the platform administrator would say, okay, every single VAC I specify then must specify IOPS to some value, because leaving it empty is going to imply something I don't want, right? That just becomes a communication between the storage vendor and the platform administrator through documentation.
Yeah, no, but I feel like it'll be like it'll surprise people a lot. It's like I was thinking about an analogy, and I'm sorry to use it, but like let's say MKFS on Linux, when you call MKFS on existing file system, it throws an error. But if you call MKFS on BSD, it formats the disk even if it has a file system on it, and just gives you a brand new file system. So it's the same. It's like we expect in this case, it's like in one case it does throw an error, and in another case it like chops your leg off. So that's the surprise sort of. I don't like as like in OpenShift, for example, we document a lot of different drivers, and it'll be very surprising to document like this behavior that is unique to each driver, like the presence and absence of key, how it treats them.
Okay, so what you're saying is you want omit to mean don't change, right?
Yeah.
So the problem I have with that is, how would a vendor unset a value or provide a way to unset a value if they wanted to have a feature that you could disable by unsetting it? Like there is no way to do it if we say at the spec level you cannot interpret an absent parameter as disable the feature or turn, remove the key. That's my worry, is that like I think we need to have a way to say, okay, you had set this previously and now I want to unset it, and so I'm doing that by changing the VAC to one that doesn't have a value. If we say at the spec level, like that's not legal, then the vendors are going to be stuck.
Well, if admin wants to unset, then surely like there was an initial value, then the admin, whoever wants to go back to the initial value, they will have to find out, okay, what is the initial value was, and create a VAC that reset back into the original value. Like that will be a workaround that will work, and that workaround will be probably more viable in many cases, because a SP might not know without hard coding what the initial value is. Like for example, in case of EBS GP3 or something, the backend, like cloud backend, may default to like
What if the initial value is the empty string? Like,
so, just a second.
Like that's my worry, is there's no way to set something to empty string if we say you must not, or that omitting a value must be a no-op, right? Then it takes away the ability to set anything to the empty string.
No, you don't set empty. So I was thinking that if an admin wants to go back to the initial value, they will have to basically hunt down and read the documentation, what the initial value defaults to, and create a VAC that applies those initial values.
Right, but what if the initial value is the empty string? There's no way to get back there.
Oh, well, I mean, empty string is still a value. Like, for example, if there was a key, it's not just numbers. You're saying is empty string is still a value. Like you could set a key, like you can call it, like, let's say in EBS case, there's some attachability or some properties there, and then you set it to like empty string. Empty string is still a value.
When
right?
gRPC marshals this string map, doesn't it omit empty strings?
It depends on how you define, I think.
If it turns out that like you can marshal an empty string over gRPC and it will show up at the modify volume call as an explicit, here is the key and the value is the empty string, then I'm fine saying that's how you set something to the empty string is by doing it explicitly and not omitting it. I want to verify that like you can actually do that. Because I assume that something would just swallow it and it would end up getting omitted. But that might be wrong.
It's also possible that actually become like deprecated. It's just no longer a valid attribute anymore, right? How do you show that?
I just have a question. If you set the value back to an empty string and pass into the modified volume call, does the provider reset that value for you to a default?
Well, that's implementation dependent, right? The vendor can do whatever they want because we don't know what all features are going to end up being implemented underneath this feature. We know about QoS, which is largely going to be numbers, but because this is a string map, other things could get implemented, and we need to just be clear about what the CO is supposed to do, and make sure that we're going to stay out of trouble here. So if it's possible to explicitly set something to the empty string in a VAC and then update the PVC, and it will pass the empty string all the way down, so the SP gets a chance to say, okay, they mean to unset this value, then I'm perfectly happy saying that's how you do it, and that omit means no op. And then we just have to come up with words that basically tell the CO that you should send all the parameters at once.
And I think there is also restriction of the update volume or whatever you call at the CO level, because you can only update it in every like a few hours, that type of restriction.
Yeah.
So
That's implementation. That's an implementation limit, right? On one platform.
Yeah.
In general, we expect vendors to be able to change this all the time. So if there are going to be implementations where like you can only make one change every few hours, we might want to define a special error code that says like too soon. Wait until much later to try again.
Okay.
But I imagine that most will allow you to mutate volumes, hundreds of times per hour if you want to, because why wouldn't they?
So we're saying that once you add an attribute to VAC, you can never remove it.
Well,
because we're comparing the old list and new list. You always have to specify it, right? And that means you can never get rid of it. You always have to specify it, so the list register could get longer and longer.
If you want to be able to like unset values, yes.
But that's unset, right? Unset, you still, right now we're saying we still have to provide that thing. Or are you saying we can skip it, or what is the conclusion there?
Well, if a value ever could have been set in the past, and you want to express the intention that it should not be set, then yeah, you got to explicitly put it in your VAC with an empty string.
But that, I'm just saying that means like all the attributes will forever be there, right?
Well, you can also say, I really don't care, right? You can say like, I'm using my VACs to manage IOPS. And I know that there's other stuff that could be managed through VACs, but I'm not doing that. And so
I know, but I mean, I'm talking about like the comparing the old VAC and the new VAC. Once it shows up in the old VAC, it will always be in the new one.
We don't compare the contents, we just compare the name. If the name changes, we're going to grab the new one.
That's what we're talking about, right? I thought that's what we're discussing.
No, right. So what we want to say is the CO doesn't need any knowledge of the old VAC at the time that it calls modified volume, right? All it needs is the new VAC and its contents, and we pass them down, and you get a success or a failure. So it's okay.
I thought we were just talking about what if there was one field you do not specify in the new VAC, what do we do? I thought that's something that we're talking, right?
Yeah, well, but that's not the CO's problem, right? That's an issue between the storage vendor and the platform administrator or the user. Right?
So you're saying this is like the driver, CSI driver will be comparing that, and then we're just.
No, I'm saying that the CO's job is to grab the bag of strings in the VAC and pass them down, and that's it. And then and it's up to the storage vendor to document which things are valid to send down, and we're going to require that things that are not specified should not be updated, right? So that if there's an optional parameter there and you omit it, that the expectation is the storage, the SP does not change that parameter.
So that stays, well, it was in the old VAC. It's
Or if it was,
we were
I
talking
mean,
about
I
going
think-
back to default, right? So which way we deciding?
So the
Not getting
concern that Hemant raised is these things can be set out of band, right? Someone can reach around
Okay,
behind
yeah,
the
of
system
course,
and
of
modify
course.
these parameters.
Yes,
And it's not the expectation that Kubernetes will reconcile it back to some value unless it's explicitly listed in the
Mhm.
VAC with the new value, right? If it's omitted, we're just going to leave it alone.
okay, so you're saying, okay, all right, this way will be easier to manage, basically. This way we
Yes,
just
yes.
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of leave it to the driver now, basically, right? SP.
Well, we're gonna tell the driver, like, don't reset things that are omitted, you know, rely on someone actually explicitly setting it to the empty string or something to disable a value. And if it's omitted, you should leave it alone,
Mhm.
because I think that will make everyone's life easier.
Yeah, I
My
think
one-
so.
My one concern is that opens the door for some other CO to do the weird thing of updating the values one at a time, right?
yeah,
If we say absence means no op, then some CO could say, oh, well, I will just update them one at a time. And the spec would seem to imply that that's allowed, unless we
Yeah.
can find a way to say it's not allowed.
maybe we can just, I don't know how we can say not allow. Maybe we can just recommend what's the best way.
Maybe.
But that's the problem with like the when you have opaque dictionary API, how do you prevent like if we had defined fields, then we could have said, okay, you must set all these values. But
Yeah.
the moment you switch APIs to opaque dictionaries, we just lose control. Users
Yeah.
will do so
They
Well,
could.
then if we can't literally prevent it, then maybe we should just have language that strongly encourages COs to not do that and to say, you should send all the values at once in a single modify call rather than calling multiple modifies. But I don't think we'll be able to prevent it. You know, all we can do is control the implementation of Kubernetes.
yeah, we just add a language that all values, all modifiable mutable parameters should be passed at once, but we cannot enforce it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
So is the strongly worded meaning using should or must?
no, I will take the action item to recommend new wording because I had recommended the old wording that caused this confusion. So I will do another proposal and I'll do what Hemant suggests and say omission means no op, and I'll try to include some should language that suggests that COs should not try to, you know, do individual updates. But I because I really don't think we can stop it, we'll sort of leave the door open for some other implementation.
Yeah, and to just like the current wording, I think will be unimplementable for some storage providers. I mean, many storage providers. So we have to but we are changing it anyway. So that's
I get that. I tried to use very strong wording because I wanted to close this door entirely, but I agree that we can't close the door, so we just have to accept the possibility. And I'll write some new words.
Yeah, but I am like I don't know what other people think about if admin wants to unset something, they send an empty string for that key. Like it's a possibility, but and we cannot at the CSS spec level. I don't think we can prevent that from happening. But it's I don't particularly like it because it leaves again the same ambiguity. Like one SP may interpret empty string as something other empty, but it's not as bad, I guess.
Well, I mean, all of these features are gonna be vendor dependent, right? I can imagine a few features where you would need to specify strings here, and I can imagine situations where you'd want to be able to set them to the empty string, and that's how I got concerned about this particular scenario. But I'm not thinking of QoS, and I don't want to encourage people to do crazy things. So I just wanted to to make sure that
Yeah. For
But-
example,
we're covering ourselves.
But like, can we suggest they always have a default VAC with all the default values? Like just from the usage perspective.
Well, I mean, just as a practical matter, for backwards compatibility, VACs are always going to be optional, right? So,
Mm.
so vendors are going to have to figure out how to deal with the possibility that they're not there, or the possibility that they are there, or the possibility you transition from a situation where they're not there to a situation where they are there. So, for backwards compatibility reasons, vendors are going to be forced to deal with that, and they'll have to come up with their strategy.
by the way, Jan had a concern like with what we discussed, like we just like a parameter that is not specified is just not updated. No up. Jan's concern was like it makes it very hard to reason about state of the volume. So for example, a volume had silver like back BSC applied, and that was IOPS 10,000 and throughput 20,000, and then gold. So, and then gold only has like, let's say IOPS. Then if you look at the volume and you look at, if you look at the PVC, like, and then you say, okay, this specific associated with gold class, you cannot reason what throughput it has because the historical data is basically lost. And the current, so that's one downside of like, skipping updating the omitted field. So it's like you cannot construct the volume state based on the current VSC.
That is a good point. But I mean, one way to address that is for vendor documentation to say, hey, don't omit this parameter, or if you're doing QoS, make sure you include all 5 of these parameters that specify the QoS policy or whatever, and don't just omit some of them. But because fundamentally you still have the same problem outside of this situation, right? Where even if you did specify every parameter in gold, you can't know for certain that no one has reached around behind the system and changed something that you didn't know about, because we're not actually reconciling the values. We're just reconciling the VAC name.
Yeah.
So if someone did make a change, we wouldn't know about it anyways. Like if we want to be able to have like if we want to strongly reason about the current state of the system, like then we needed to go back to the non-opaque version of this where we spell it all out and reconcile the individual values and make everyone agree on what the values mean. And we all concluded that like that's too hard.
Yeah. Have we closed door on another thing that I was thinking, like what mutable parameters storage provider supports? Like it can give a list, returns a list. Okay, these are the parameters one can tune, and all of those parameters has to be specified in the controller modified.
No, I think that's what documentation is for.
Mm-hmm.
Because the problem is if you try to enforce it in code, when you upgrade, the list will change and everything will break immediately. Like I think you just have to document like these are all the ones you should use, and we recommend setting all of them. Otherwise, you're going to get behavior you don't like.
Yeah. No, I was thinking about that like if it was a list in the CSI RPC call, then that list itself can change over time based on capabilities, new things, and coming up and whatnot. And then your older VSC becomes invalid.
And it's possible that like vendors will implement multiple different features through this one mechanism, and that they'll be mutually optional, right? You can implement one without the other, or the other without the one, or you can implement both or neither. And you don't want to put people in a situation where like they have to implement all the features. I think this will be a very powerful mechanism. It'll be used for lots of different things. I just want to make sure that like Kubernetes isn't caught in the middle of all that, and that we're enabling a very straightforward, change on the fly, and then leaving up to the vendor, what actually happens. And I'm on your side about empty should or omitted should mean no op, even if that means that like, yeah, you know, you can't fully reason about the state of the volume based on the active VAC.
So to capture some conclusions here, it sounds like we're saying omitted parameter means no op, not unset. Unset can happen with setting to original value. This might get tricky with empty strings. We'll have to validate that that's possible. Any other conclusions that came out of this?
But we're gonna, well, I'm gonna take the action item to write new wording for the spec that explains this and recommends that COs send all of the parameters in a single call rather than doing a one-by-one update. Because that was my intention in the first place, and this got way deeper. Stepped into a very deep hole by accident.
Yeah, no, it's good that we talked through it. This is it has a lot of potential implications on what we will do in the future and how retries are handled and so many different things. So this is definitely worth talking through.
Yeah. Yeah. And Kubernetes side of things, this will be interesting. Like a lot of state probably, yeah, like users can change volume type and whatnot with this, right? Beyond the IOPS and throughput. So one can migrate a volume from, I don't know, HDD to NVMe or something.
Well,
like that. Yeah.
they can do that as long as it's not disruptive, right? We're not creating a facility to like disruptively modify volume. So as long as the storage controller has magic that makes it seem like the volume is always online, then yeah, they can play all kinds of games in the back end.
So if the volume has to be offline for this, then we are, yeah, we'll just, I think there was a discussion on the GitHub thread about volume being offline required for that one.
Well, you might return a precondition failed, but
Yeah.
then the sidecar will just spin until the precondition stops failing. And presumably that means you detach it from the pod, right? But like we would recommend against doing that. But again, I don't think we can stop people from doing that.
Would it be a worthwhile goal to figure out, not for this iteration, but before we go to beta, if we can make the volume resize work through this? Or is that forever going to be two different APIs?
Well,
Yeah, so-
again, because the expand volume feature specifically requires node side work, and this feature doesn't touch the node side, I don't know how we could bring them together.
yeah, unless we add a node side modify volume, that'll be more tricky. And then like from Kubernetes side, it will be like because this current proposal skips the whole recording of state in PVC. So it will require that part to be updated as well. So yeah.
Maybe we should have some word that says like this should only be used for controller side options, and that because if there was a value which would normally be implemented by the node plugin, then like this won't work, right? Like if you put it in your parameters, then the SP has an opportunity to sort of plumb that all the way through to the node plugin through the volume context. But here, there is no context that gets plumbed through to the node plugin. And so the node plugin will only ever get to see the initial value potentially. And then, yeah, if you mutate it, it'll never see the new values because the volume context never changes. Like the published context can change if it gets attached to a new node. But yeah, there would be no context associated with this. And it's not stored anywhere in Kubernetes.
Yeah, but do we want to like put wording that says, okay, you should not try and modify capacity of the volume with this call?
Well,
Because
I mean, for some types of volumes, like an NFS volume, it would be fine, right? If you want to resize an NFS volume by sending a string down, NFS volume capacity, the node doesn't care about it, it's just a number. So it would be harmless to implement it that way. I mean, I think it would be obviously a bad idea given that we have a formal expand volume feature in CSI.
yeah, also like if you expand this way, then again, like the size, your PVC PV will not reflect the new size. So they will keep reporting the older value. So it's
Right,
not,
right. Yeah, it would get you around quotas and all kinds of other things. So I think it's pretty obvious you should not use this to implement a resize. But we can't literally stop SPs from doing that.
yeah, but I'm just saying that do we need to carry wording to that effect? That okay, you should-
I think it's obvious because we have an expand volume feature that says this is how you expand volumes, but we can make it double obvious by spelling it out. I'm not opposed to that. It kind of seems pedantic to a reader reading through the spec. Like, well, of course you shouldn't use this to expand because we have another RPC that's used for expanding.
No, but yeah, I mean, we can add it like the capacity of the volume shouldn't be modified using controller modify volume call or
Sure. Adding the words is harmless, and it actually does make it less likely someone does something crazy.
You say that.
I was going to say I come from a place where crazy stuff happens all the time, so I'm not optimistic that we'll avoid craziness.
We added in the volume mount group RPC, we added wording that you should not use that for recursive chmod, and then drivers exactly did that.
Oh God.
I mean, just a second.
Okay, was there one more thing on the agenda related to this spec? One other question that we were trying to tackle?
First question was, if capability is not advertised, whose responsibility is it to suppress both parameters?
Yes. So James had said we should add wording that says the CO, or sorry, the SP must ignore, and I prefer saying the CO must not send this RPC, or in crate volume that the mutable parameters must be empty if the capability is not there, so that the SP doesn't have to worry about getting garbage.
I think SP should be defensive regardless, right? No matter if we say promise, pinky promise, we're not going to do this, they should still be defensive in their implementation.
Yeah,
So,
I mean that's the case for everything in CSI, but I do think it's worth saying the CO must not.
yeah, maybe we can have both, ideally.
I mean, that just basically says that the sidecar needs to perform a capabilities check before making a call to either create volume or modify volume. That's all it really requires. And then yes, SPs will be as defensive as they always are.
Isn't that difficult to make the SP ignore certain parameters? If we actually send a request, Like, what does this must ignore mean?
Well, I mean, it would be very weird for an SP to have code that even reads that parameter if it doesn't have the capability, right? Like that would be a strange situation. But if someone did it, then like, and they choose to act on the values that come in, like that's just a strange implementation choice. I don't see how it could break anything. But it would be dependent on what the choices the storage vendor made.
Yeah, I think that argument, Ben, is a valid one of like, hey, if I am an SP that chose not to implement this capability, or if I haven't even updated my driver yet to accept this, it's the CO's responsibility to make sure that those mutable parameters don't come through because my driver is not designed to handle them.
Right. But thanks to the magic of gRPC, like nothing bad will happen.
Right.
Right. They'll just get ignored.
Yeah, I think for that reason, it probably doesn't matter, but yeah, +1 to your conclusion. Anyone object?
So I just wanted to mention that James did agree to a meeting to discuss this next Monday. And I think Sunny, you set that up and you invited Hemant is on the invite, Saad's on the invite. If anyone else, that's going to be at noon Pacific on Monday. So if anyone else wants to have another round of discussion or just join the round of discussion, it's only a half hour. We just wanted to get James's buy-in, and he couldn't make this meeting, so we scheduled a one-off.
Yeah, and if you want a meeting invite, please let me know.
Yes, so
email.
Sunny's organizing that.
Cool. All right, so I think first question, if capability is not advertised, whose responsibility is it to suppress mutable parameters? I think we concluded CO, but SP should design in defense. And follow-up meeting with JDEF next week to discuss that. Second question, what do we do if user specifies mutable parameters in unsupported case? Conclusion is failed precondition is not handled. Especially by CO. Kubernetes will keep retrying and it is up to user to notice and fix the invalid parameters. Increase max exponential timeout from 2 minutes to 10 minutes or 15 minutes to handle this case. And then third question was what happens on empty mutable parameter list in controller modify or omitted mutable parameters? Conclusion was omitted parameters mean no op, not unset. Unset can happen by setting to original value. There's a little bit of a trickiness around empty strings that'll need more testing. We will also specify that node plugin does not get updated on modify volume, only controller plugin, and add wording to say that volume resize should be done via modify volume. Should not be done via modify volume.
Yeah.
And Ben, you're gonna help with the wording on this stuff.
Yep.
Cool. Anything else from anyone else regarding this PR? All right, good discussion. Anything else before we go today? All right on time. Thanks a lot, folks.
Thank you for running the meeting. Bye-bye.
Take care.